Hello, my name is Liz Wilkinson. I'm the executive director, I should say, for finance at Bournemouth Borough Council, and we are setting up a bank. We would make our first loans and mortgages in September. And I guess the reason that we're invited to speak this afternoon, for which I thank you very much indeed, is because we're actually doing it. And I have to say I listened with avid interest to all the speakers so far this afternoon. And I'd like to think as a result that I'm amongst friends. And actually, whilst my first slide, the first part of my presentation is talk very much about the philosophy and concept, I think actually it's already been covered. I don't disagree with anything that anybody's actually said so far. Okay, so what I'm going to try and cover this afternoon is the philosophy and concept of what it is we're doing, the key purpose and objective in us doing it, what we've done so far, and what happens next for us in bringing this journey forward, taking us all forward on this journey. Okay. So I think it was Alex, actually, when you spoke very much about what your personal interest was, what your motivation was. And that was very much where I wanted to start this talk. My personal interest as a finance person in what local government could do in the banking world was actually sparked on my very first day at work, far too long ago for me actually to even work out how many years that was now, when I was a trainee finance professional working for the Audit Commission. And I started my life up in Stockton-on-Tees at the time as a trainee, and the first job that I was asked to go and do as a novice was to audit the municipal bank. And I thought this was fascinating because as a graduate coming out of university and completely naive and totally unknowledgeable about local government itself, I didn't know that councils did banking. And of course, quite soon after that, they stopped doing banking. So it didn't last that long in my professional experience, but I was fascinated by that. I thought this is something that councils do that can be quite a different way of engaging with its community. And that has kind of stayed with me, actually, over the last 20 years or so. It's something that probably came to the fore in my mind as we were sort of 2006, 2007. And the storm clouds were gathering, and it was perfectly obvious that the world was going to move into a financial crisis of some magnitude, clearly a far greater magnitude than any of us would have hoped for. But the thing that probably galvanised me and my thinking and sort of brought together a synthesis of various thoughts about what we could and should do as local government in the future was when I heard Richard Koo speak at CIPFA conference, CIPFA being my professional institute, back in 2010. And I'm sure that you're all very well aware of who Richard Koo is, an eminent Japanese economist. And what he actually spoke about was that we weren't in a structural deficit situation, we were actually in a balance sheet recession. And what the remedies were around that in economic terms were very different to what we might have been listening to at that time. And I think the thing that I took away from that discussion was actually the importance of looking at things differently. Yeah? Whether you agree with his economic philosophies or indeed remedies, completely different issue. But what was really important when I heard him speak was the fact that he was thinking and looking at the problem in an entirely different way that allowed me to think more creatively about what we could do in the little space that we occupy in this world. And that's a very different thing to what local government, albeit had done previously, had been working in and had been sort of thinking about in terms of remedies for the future, for its communities. What seemed most obvious to me at the time was that looking at things differently is important, but equally, if you're going to make anything fly, you've got to work with the grain. Yeah? And working with the grain of people's psychological engagement with banking and why it's important to them, it seemed apparent to me that what local government had was the opportunity and taking the opportunity to actually moderate in the market, to actually provide that alternative, to actually give something that people needed to the people who needed it and solve their problems in a very different way. So this all sort of, for me, started quite a few years ago, and what I've been doing ever since is trying to find the opportunities to bring it forward. And having moved to Bournemouth a year ago from my previous authority, The opportunity rather marvellously arose when I was appointed by the leader of Bournemouth Borough Council, who I have to say, notwithstanding the last speaker's observations about politicians and their agendas and all the rest of it, which may be generally the case, I'm not sure. The leader of Bournemouth Borough Council is a man of incredible intellect and, I have to say, great vision. And Councillor Beasley's agenda is not for the short term. Councillor Beasley's agenda is for the long-term transformation of the town. And he is very, very clear that the way in which that can happen and the purpose of local government is to act as the engine house, the driver for growth, investment and recovery. And if you can do that on a local level and it's scalable, that actually should be the focus of how local government contributes to the future of this country. And it isn't just a local issue. And I think it's a very profound philosophy and one whereby there was a genuine meeting of minds. We were able to bring forward something really concrete and something really important, I think, and hopefully something that will show others how it can be achieved. So what is our purpose and objective then? Bournemouth Borough Council is a member-led organisation and our members care about the town. You come across some councils, some local authorities, and I've worked for many up and down the country, where actually some of the focus really is around the organisation. Bournemouth has a very different feel and a very different intent. The purpose of Bournemouth Council is to deliver and support the development and transformation of the town. And members are extremely clear and very, very focused about that being our entire purpose. So clearly, a banking initiative of this kind anchors in very, very well to that agenda. Because, as we see, in the absence of private sector, the private sector's ability to act at this time, for all the reasons that we all know about, local government, and particularly Bournemouth, has the opportunity to act. And we need to act because what we really want to do is that we want to make substantial investment to grow the town and to regenerate certain parts of the town that are quite deprived, and to actually improve quality of life, to do all of these social policy things that a previous speaker spoke about earlier, and to deliver those things, whether that's the green economy and sustainability, whether that's social equalities, the whole universal credit thing I listen to with great fascination. It's one of the things that's in my portfolio and causing us a great deal of pain. But essentially, and somebody earlier on today said this, actually the whole focus, the principal strapline of this has been and is to create and retain wealth locally. A number of speakers spoke, I think, before me about the issue of big banking institutions, big commerce, siphoning money away from communities. Okay? Now, we felt in local government the impacts of that industrial sort of that kind of process, that approach, in two principal ways when it comes to managing the finances of a local council, which, as you know, are very complex. Two ways that our customers, that our residents feel that. One, those who have feel it in their lost income if they're reliant on capital investment, and those who have not are actually feeling it because they can't access the banking institutions that they need as we move into a more and more increasingly digitalised society. So we have problems across the whole agenda. So that leads me into, so one of the purposes is to better meet our customers' needs and expectations of what local government can do in this space. Because we all know that there is a market for an alternative. Okay? One of the traditional roles of local government has been to create moderation, to moderate in the market, to provide an alternative competitive route. So why shouldn't we do that? Yeah? The point, of course, in being a council is that we don't just serve one segment of our population or one client group or one customer. We have to understand and manage across the entirety of our community. Now, in terms of the council's sort of approach and policies, it's been very much about the inclusivity agenda, very, very clear understanding of the fact that local government needs to be there to support the most vulnerable in our community, but an equal value and weight being placed on the fact that we're actually there to do something for everybody. Yeah? So our solution around the banking proposal is quite subtle and, I would say, granular in trying to attempt to bring forward an operating model that allows us to do both, and I'll talk about that shortly. Okay. So, our banking initiative, which of course I think, as Fiona said, we're not allowed to call ourselves a bank, hence we're calling it a community financing initiative, is part of an overall coherent suite of initiatives that supports the delivery of the council's financial strategy and overall ambitions for the town. I think this is an important point for me, at least, that I wanted to get across, was that the banking initiative is one part of a whole coherent programme of engaging with the community and achieving inward investment in a completely different way. Okay? The other key pillars in that strategy are the development of a strategic investment partnership with a large pensions fund, which we are working on currently and which will come forward in business case in May. And we're looking at around inward investment deployment of around about £300 million into Bournemouth through that route. But also, at the other end of this continuum, bearing in mind what I was saying about trying to make an offering that is ubiquitous and available to all, is to actually enter into development of a series of strategic service alliances which, with our local credit unions. I have great passion for credit unions. Lovely to hear somebody else talking with passion about credit unions as well in this kind of forum, and have actually quite a long track record with the local credit union, principal local credit union, I should say, in Dorset, which is the Coastal Credit Union. Invested in their development of a current account jam jar system a couple of years ago. I think the points that were made earlier about the fact that the credit union, in terms of strategic opportunity for local government, is immense, and how welfare reform is bringing that to the fore is, I think, now becoming a far more understood subject, as it were. But actually, the instability of that structure and how it delivers is something that we need to work on with our credit unions to make sure that we can not only strengthen them, but also make sure that we do it in such a way as it serves the purpose of the authority and indeed saves the taxpayer huge amounts of money in the future. So there is a bit of self-interest going on there as well. This leads me on to the next point, which is all of this clearly is anchored in the social responsibilities of the authority, but it is for a commercial purpose. Okay? There is no doubt that this is about making money. Right, because what we recognise in bringing forward our financial strategy for the future is that actually we need to be far less exposed and far less reliant on traditional funding streams into local government. We've all understood and experienced the cutbacks in central government funding over the last 4 years and capping around council tax. Now, if you start to severely restrict those funding streams, local councils have one of two alternatives, really, to my mind. The first alternative is to retrench, cut your cloth, get smaller, become less competent, do less, and the road to ruin lies ahead. Or you can try to take your opportunities, build with the resources that you've got, get leverage through that and create alternative revenue streams. But this is all very, very long-term stuff, and it doesn't happen overnight, as I'm sure you appreciate. Final purpose, albeit not necessarily the last purpose, but the final big one, is actually this issue around community pride and value. Yeah? So, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, when we had a lot of pensioners in the area who were actually struggling because they were capital rich but revenue poor, to actually get revenue out of their savings, as it were. This was kind of one of the things that we started to sort of think about was, well, how can we not only support their cash in hand position, as it were, through a better offering of interest, but what's in it for them apart from the money? Apart from the money, maybe there is this concept of actually believing in investing in your local community and believing that the money that you have available can be recycled through your community to grow that community and to deliver social gain and benefits to others, but also as a byproduct to yourself. So again, we can't move away from the fact that this is not a wholly altruistic measure. This is a fairly self-interested measure on the part of the local community as a society in its own right. But the point is to try to anchor in to that experience and desire to build community pride and value in Bournemouth. And I have to say it is a theme within the town generally that we're trying to sort of resonate with and reflect. Okay. So what have we done so far? So far we've assembled the project team. We've undertaken all of our various stakeholder interest assessments and needs. I'm fairly confident that we have a good understanding of what they are now. Undertaken a fair amount of market research. Is this something that people want? I have to say the market research is absolutely compelling. The obvious questions when asked, would you like to be able to get a mortgage? Amazingly enough, 95% of young people said that they would, so no surprise there. But very, very compelling market research that supports this initiative coming forward. I've been doing a lot of work around product design. Some of that product design is very vanilla, very straightforward. Some of the product design is slightly more complex, taking on sort of models from housing sector in the past about shared ownership and shared investment ownership with third-party investors such as pension funds. We've been doing obviously all the risk analysis. Our strategic partnering agenda is coming forward nicely, and we are in the process of establishing an investment company in order to cycle this money through to create that revenue stream back to the council. So what's happening next? We agree the preferred route to market in the next 6 weeks, John. Business case comes forward for Cabinet decision in June. The operating model will be implemented thereafter. The first mortgage will be offered in September this year. The business will grow in earnest from 13-14. We have taken a very clear line that we start tactically. I think was the phrase that Fiona used. We build it organically, but the intention is that over time, this will become self-funding. Thank you very much.